Hi there, I'm Judith. This is Brekkie. I started this channel because I own a little house, and I love to talk about it. Today I plan to tell my story about how I financed it when I have a very humble income and little savings in the bank. Those of you who've watched my video from bag lady to homeowner will recognize that I'm picking up the story right where that one left off. And yes, this is my personal story. Let me start. So where was I with my little house story? I was in a hotel, yes. I had a little room barely bigger than my bed. And what was the clue I could get a house? One day I heard the housekeepers chatting with each other, as they did every day. I enjoyed them too. Anyway, I heard them chatting with each other, and I heard one of them say she was getting a house that day. And they began having a conversation about it, and I heard bits and pieces. 3 bits and pieces in particular that mattered to me. One was that it was not going to be a manufactured house. The second was that it was an energy efficient house. And the third was that it came from a local company here called Vermont. My ears were perking up, as you can tell. Why would they perk up at that information? Here's the thing. I came from a universe where I had almost nothing except my brains. I have a very curious mind. I look things up. And for years, I have been trying to figure out what to do about a home. I'd looked high and low, got a few ideas, or at least stuffed my head with things. Well, one day I was driving around and I saw these really weird buildings. And I thought, oh, those are really weird. I wonder if I could live there. And then I saw outside a sign that said, built by Vermont. I stashed that away in my brain. Another time I was driving around and I saw, oh, it says that's Vermont, the business. Oh, those 2 things go together. Interesting. When I heard that housekeeper say that name, I knew exactly where I needed to go. I was at Vermont the next day. I was touring their model. I was chatting with the owner. Oh, they were so nice. I saw the model and I thought, oh, I don't know. I've never seen a house like that before. Is that a trailer? What kind of a thing is that? But anyway, I stepped inside and it was glorious. It was so bright and light, fresh. It would have had everything I needed and then a whole lot more. It was a 3-bedroom house. I didn't need anything that big and I knew it, but I so could have settled for something that large. I couldn't imagine owning something like that at this stage in my life. They pointed me in a couple of directions about where I might find financing. They were used to folks with humble incomes. They'd lived here for a long time, and I live in a very workaday town. I'm sure they hadn't met someone quite like me, but that's besides the point. They were used to working with people that had humble incomes and directing them where to go to find financing sources. And that's what they did with me. So off I went with their information in my almost already stuffed head. They told me that some of their clients had financing from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I'd never heard of that before, as far as finding money for a house. I'd heard of FHA, I'd heard of Fannie Mae, I'd heard of that kind of thing. Those are options too, incidentally. And I went to one of the few banks that offered USDA loans in this area. It's kind of a niche. For some reason, I can't even remember now, I got a clue that the bank is not where you go for the kind of loan that I needed, that someone with a really humble income needed. They told me to call the USDA office, and I did. Next thing I know, I'm filling out paperwork. By the end of the next day, I knew I qualified for the next step. So I'd passed the basic qualification. In the meantime, I had other information spinning around in my head. It was almost magical, the way it kind of spun out and became relevant. For years, I had looked at this regional housing agency in another county, randomly browsing around on the internet looking for housing. And I found this one that had a home buyer program. And if you bought through them, and I didn't quite see how they did this, you could get a fairly discounted house. I had no idea how that worked, but somehow it was happening. Now, I didn't like the kinds of houses they were selling. It might be an old 6-bedroom house, not anything I could use. And gosh forbid, heating a 6-bedroom house in this area would have been prohibitive, way more than my income just for the heat. I called them and they said, sure, we'll send someone out to meet you. You can fill out the form, you can have a brief little interview, and then we go from there. Hard to believe, yes? In a week or so, there I was meeting with their guy in an office here locally. He had driven here to meet me. We had a chat about what was on the form. We talked about what I had available in terms of income. And he told me I would need to present a budget. No problem, I had a budget with me. I was used to preparing budgets, you see, because I had been using an app way back in the day. I used Quicken 1.0 and I used TurboTax 1.0. That's how long I had been doing my finances on a computer. And I had been using little gizmos before that even, before you could ever do finances on a computer. So I had some kind of savvy about how to develop a budget and present it. I had used the apps intermittently over the course of time, but something in my head told me I needed a budget for this program. So I went with the budget, nicely printed out, because that's what those apps do for you. And I sat down with this fellow. Oh, he was lovely too. Lovely man. But that regional housing agency then contacted me and said, although they handle my county, they didn't handle my town. No problem. They were handing me over to another regional housing agency. It was that group that had monies available for home down payments for folks with humble incomes. Simply, it's a home buying portion of the local group that builds affordable housing and then rents units out. Just a little portion of that organization. And the person who ran that program for them, lovely person. She became my coach, answered my questions, and pushed so I could have enough resources to put down for a down payment and also to help with closing costs. By then, I was in the process of submitting the next level of paperwork to the USDA. So you see, in the matter of a week or two, I knew I could corral all the resources that were needed for a house. I didn't know I'd have this one in particular. I had to design it myself in the end. I didn't know I'd be working with a particular builder, and I could have bought an existing house. There were many possibilities there. I wasn't being offered funds that could only apply to someone who was looking at this kind of a house. It could apply to any kind of house, provided it had the approval of that particular agency. And that was part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And there I was, homebound. Miraculous. I couldn't believe it. And then my life became a matter of, well, what kind of house did I want? How big of a house? What might be possible? What did I need? Where would I put it? Those questions all got resolved later. In fact, those questions in particular, maybe they took a year to resolve, at least many months, before I had them all figured out. But I kind of knew. My anxiety niched down a little bit. Not all of it was gone, I tell you. This was the most dramatic thing that I've done in my life and the most anxiety-provoking. This was not an easy experience, and I was so lucky to have as my coaches, my support team, the folks at USDA, and the folks at my regional housing agency. They took care of me so well. And I was super lucky that the three of us really clicked. Oh, it was great. And they were invested in this project as much as I was. They were so thrilled to see me happy. Oh, it was wonderful. That's my story for now. That's enough. But I'll be telling more of it as my channel moves along. I hope you'll be there with me. I'd like to see you again. Subscribe. so you can hear follow-up episodes. And you can tell I'm just beginning, so a like is always encouraging. We'll talk soon, all right? See you then.